This video is going to go through the Chinese calendar and how there's references in the Bible which support the dragon, for example, that's on the Chinese calendar. So this is a real interesting one for me. I'm going to go through, just read a bit from the wiki article. You can see the link at the bottom. Basically what we're talking about, if you look at the Chinese calendar, there's a whole bunch of real animals. So there's an ox and a rat and a pig and a dog and a chicken and so on, right? Monkey, ram, horse. And then you get around to the dragon. So it's interesting that there is a whole bunch of real creatures that we know of and can relate to and you know, see on this earth. And then there's all of a sudden there's a dragon in there, a winged creature with a long tongue, which we don't understand. So I want to talk about that. So here's a bit from the wiki article. There is no universally agreed upon epoch, and this is dealing with the history, the background of the Chinese calendar. There's no universally agreed upon epoch or starting point for the Chinese calendar. Tradition holds that the calendar was invented by Emperor Huangdi in the 61st year of his reign in what is known under the proleptic Gregorian calendar as 2637 BC. Many have used this date as an epoch, the first year of the 60-year cycle of the Chinese calendar, but others have used the date of the beginning of his reign in 2697 BC as the epoch. Since these dates are exactly 60 years apart, it does not matter which is used to determine the stem, branch, sequence, or astrological signs for any succeeding year. That is, 2006 is a Bingzu year and the year of the dog, regardless of whether the years are counted from 2637 BC or 2697 BC. Now, a bunch of that is neither here nor there for this discussion. You can read about the Chinese calendar on Wikipedia. There's some interesting stuff. A couple of things I want to point out is the fact that this is only about 3,000 years before Christ. So that's interesting, because that lines up with the history of the Bible, the 6 days of creation and the 6,000-year timeline of the history of the world, which I believe in. So that's just an interesting point from a young Earth creationist point of view, and it lends credence to the short history of the world, because China and the Chinese emperors is that's, I think, one of the oldest kingdoms there is and there are. Now, there are stories of Marco Polo visiting China, and I just want to read a bit about what he was doing. He was an explorer, and he saw some interesting things in his travels to China. Marco Polo was a trader and explorer who spent over 20 years traveling throughout Asia, Persia, and China, and in Indonesia. It was his journey which ultimately inspired other men like Christopher Columbus to explore the world. His travels took place from 1271 to 1298. So there's a bit of the history. That's known history. Everybody agrees upon that. There's not a lot of dispute there or reason to dispute, you know, that he was a real person and that he explored China around that time. The book, The Travels of Marco Polo, is a written record which chronicles the adventures and travels of Marco Polo experienced while exploring the Eastern world. In Part 2, Chapter 40, Marco Polo reports what he describes as huge serpents. The descriptions given sound in many ways no different than descriptions given of dinosaurs in textbooks. So this doesn't specifically speak of the dragon, but it suggests that he saw, while he was living, things that looked like dinosaurs, and that's a whole another topic I could get into. The evidence for dinosaurs, that yes, they roamed the earth even after the flood, which was about 4,000 years ago. So even after the flood they roamed, and of course Marco Polo would be post-flood, certainly in the young Earth creationist viewpoint. And I certainly don't hold to the view that the world is millions of years old for various reasons, but anyways. So we have some history here of Marco Polo documenting what he thinks is a dinosaur, or what sounds like, from our point of view, a dinosaur. We just don't have a living relative of it now that is that big to look at it and for the scientists to conclusively say, yes, this is a dinosaur living here and now. Although we have some good representatives of that. I'll keep going here. This is about, this is further in the article there. You can see from the Marco Polo, the link below there, tells about a story. Leaving the city of Yachi and traveling 10 days in a westerly direction, you reach the province of Karazhan. And that is interesting because it relates to, seems like it relates to some of the terrorists in the Middle East right now, the Khorazans. Anyways, which is also named of the chief city. That's interesting. Here are seen huge serpents 10 paces in length, about 30 feet, and 10 spans, about 8 feet girt of the body. And the forepart near the head, they have 2 short legs, having 3 claws like those of a tiger, and eyes larger than a 4-penny loaf, and very glaring. So you're talking about a creature 30 foot long, 8 foot wide, 3 toes on it. If you look at that, that is a big animal, and certainly there's no living land animals that are so large. I think the largest is an elephant that we know of today and have experienced. So the size of that sounds like a dinosaur, certainly. And you could argue, well, he didn't have a measuring tape with him, so maybe he was way off. And I suppose that's a good point. But the fact is that he said it was about 10 paces in length. So I'm going to take him at his word. I don't see that there's any evidence to suggest that he is lying or that he has any reason to deceive. I'll keep reading here. The jaws are wide enough to swallow a man. The teeth are large and sharp. Their whole appearance is so formidable that neither man nor any kind of animal can approach them without terror. And if you think of the largest land animal, being the elephant, I don't think there's anything larger than that on land. It's certainly not a terrible, scary creature if you think of an elephant. All right. So this would be something different altogether. Others are met with a smaller size, being 8, 6, or 5 paces long, and following the method. And the following method is used for taking them. In the daytime, by reason of great heat, they lurk in the caverns, from whence at night they issue to seek food, and whatever beasts they meet with and can lay hold of, whether tiger, wolf, or any other, they devour. So the second part of that is, if it's true that this animal eats tigers or wolves, they got to be a big creature, first of all, and elephants are not carnivorous. They would not hunt down a tiger or be able to hunt down a tiger, and it would be too big to eat for even an elephant anyways. So that lends credence again to that it's a dinosaur of some sort. So you can read that from the link there I show there. But it just goes to suggest that yes, man was living and saw something that looked like dinosaurs. Okay, so we'll start there. Back to the Chinese mythology. In Chinese mythology, Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, was the most ancient of 5 legendary Chinese emperors, as well as a patron of Taoism, one of China's main religions. He was also a culture hero credited with civilizing the earth, teaching people many skills, and inventing numerous useful items, including the wheel, armor, weapons, writing, compass, coin, bunny. So those are things that I would suggest that historians would point to and agree with, and have no reason to disbelieve that yes, this man brought these items to the table for civilization. But this emperor, and I'll get into it below, in addition, he could communicate directly with the gods. That's what they say, through his prayers and sacrifices. When he traveled around his empire, he rode in an ivory chariot pulled by dragons and an elephant. So that is obviously one of the things I want to focus in on. Here's a Chinese emperor, and I would think many historians wouldn't argue with much of what is said about him. But an interesting detail is that he pulled his ivory chariot with dragons and an elephant. And there are sources on Google that suggest that this emperor, the Yellow Emperor, in fact raised dragons, uh, not incubating them, but I guess bred them and raised them up to pull his chariot. Now they suggest that's mythology and legend, but I think there's a bit of truth to that, and so back to the question: why are real animals? Why are all real animals and one a mythical animal? If you look at the history and the stories and the legend, there's always a truth to be behind any kind of story or legend that you read. And I think the truth here that I see, that the evidence seems to support, that the old stories seem to support, and the evidence of man with dinosaurs, I think it supports that the dragon, seen in the bottom right here, is truly an animal that was alive during this time, and I believe it fits right in with Bible history. I'll just read a bit about what the Bible describes here. The Bible describes a few fascinating creatures that some have classified as dragons. There is a leviathan, the mighty, imperviously scaled sea creature that breathes fire. That's in Job 41. Another animal is called behemoth. Is described as a plant-eating creature that moves his tail like a cedar, so his tail is the size of a tree, and whose bones are like beams of bronze. Job 40:15-24. Behemoth's characteristics, along with other descriptions in this passage, often bring to mind the mighty sauropod dinosaurs such as Brachiosaurus. So we can see in the Bible what describes in historicity as a dinosaur, something we would label a dinosaur in this day and age. If you put together the works, all the old historical books, the works of antiquity, the writers, the legends, the myths, why would they all suggest there's things like dinosaurs and dragons? Without unless you think they dug up bones and put together bones and knew about dinosaurs, even though they had been extinct apparently for millions of years. I think the easier conclusion, the more obvious conclusion, and the obvious simple conclusion is usually the truer conclusion. I think it's obvious and true via Chinese writing and Middle Eastern writing and even Western Native Indian writing that man did have some exposure to dinosaurs, although in the few years they had left. You can find that at answersingenesis.org. Just go to answersingenesis.org. You see the link at the bottom there. The conclusion I come to is that dinosaurs are real, dragons are real. If you look at the myths and the evidence and the fossil records and the timing of the earth and the Bible, you put all of world's history together, spoken, written, the evidence, the scientific evidence, the empirical evidence we find, you put all that together, and what it tells you is man was living with dinosaurs in one way, shape, or form. And I would suggest even that there are dinosaurs alive today. Now, if you look at lizards, for example, they never stop growing. So if you give them a couple hundred years, they're going to get really big. Same with alligators. They never stop growing. The problem is that we like to kill them within our lifetime pretty quick because the big animals we kill for meat. But anyways, I would encourage you to do your own research, check it out, go Google dinosaurs and man, read your Bible, and learn that the Bible is true and that these ancient civilizations knew what they were talking about. They weren't just making things up. The Chinese did not just make this up. This is true world history, and you should know about it and not be tricked or deceived by evolution and the worldview that is prevalent today. All right, thanks for watching.